Hey, welcome once again to the Zombie Tactics channel. Today, once again, wading into a new subject, kind of expanding the channel. And I'm going to wade into this carefully because I'm going to be discussing politics and economics. And those are some minefields, if ever there were subjects that were minefields. But I want to discuss to you something today. The title of the video is going to be called The Nexus. And ooh, does that sound ominous? And it should sound ominous. I'm going to explain to you what that's all about, and in the process kind of give you some foundational thinking on my part anyway, let you know how I think and how this twisted gray matter works and the way I think through problems and sort of take a look at the world and what's happening all around us. Well, if I'm going to discuss politics and economics, I'm going to kind of go back to some concepts of the starting of this country, the United States of America, and taking a look back through those founding documents and the writings and the reasonings that all of the men who founded this country went through. We're going to find some concepts that are really interesting, and they bear on politics, but they also bear on economics, and probably in ways that are obvious to some of you, but it'll be kind of like, I never knew that for the rest of you. And so I'm looking back at those documents, and I'm finding, well, what's a good way to summarize this? And I'm looking at the Declaration of Independence, where it talks about inalienable rights or unalienable rights, and it says that the chief among those unalienable rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, those three phrases, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, are probably some of the most argued about or misunderstood phrases in all of political literature, but let me kind of take you through it really quickly based upon my understanding of the thinking of the men who wrote those words, primarily Thomas Jefferson with some help from James Madison and Ben Franklin and others. Well, first of all, the central notion behind that is a really radical one. It's the first time in anywhere in the history of mankind that anyone wrote down this idea, and that is that everyone has rights that are given to them by God or by nature. Nature or nature's God is the term that was often used in those writings. And that those rights don't come from the state, they don't come from the king, they don't come because you were born into a good family. They're just yours because you exist. And it defined them in that order, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness in the Declaration of Independence, for a very important reason, and that's because they wanted to talk about some concepts that they thought were lacking in all the governments of the world, and specifically Great Britain at the time, or which had become debased. And they wanted to reclaim them or establish them or reestablish them. So the idea of everyone has an unalienable right to life, meaning you own your own self, you own your own person. Nobody else can own you. Okay? You're not property. Now, I know people will say, well, some of them own slaves, so that kind of makes them a hypocrite, doesn't it? No, and I'll probably get into this discussion in a later video, but you have to keep in mind that the very first place in the whole world where anybody started to dismantle the whole problem of slavery worldwide was the United States of America. Now, some people will say that no, that was William Wilberforce in Great Britain. I'd argue that point with you based on the historical record pretty forcefully. That no, it wasn't. It was probably the Commonwealth of Vermont, one of the U.S. colonies, that first began to pass laws against slavery and things like that. So it happened here before it did anywhere else. And what they were establishing as a principle right off the bat was, no, everybody owns their own life. And they honestly did mean, yes, even the slaves, and we'll get to that problem as soon as we can. And because you own your own life, you have the right to live your own life, and that means you have liberty. Life, liberty. You have the liberty to live your own life. You don't need to be controlled by all kinds of people telling you what to do about every little thing in your life. Where to go, who to talk to, what to say, when to get up, when, to go to sleep, blah, 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 what to eat, what not to eat. You don't need that. You have liberty, and you have liberty because you own your own life. See, the liberty comes from the fact that you own your own life. They're related to each other. They're not just fuzzy ideas thrown out there. And because you have your own life, and you have liberty because you have your own life, you have something called the pursuit of happiness. Now, this is the phrase that gets really dicey, and it's the one that Jefferson and Madison and Franklin and others argued about, because what they really were trying to say was, you have the right to get property, to buy and sell things. You have the right to ply your own trade, whether you're a blacksmith or a lawyer or a doctor or whatever. You have the right to ply your own trade. You have the right to acquire property. Jefferson actually wanted to say life, liberty, and the right to property, except that they realized that right off the bat, that made it sound like you were saying, well, you were justifying hitting people over the head and taking things because, well, I have a right to property, right? Bang, it's mine now. And they really didn't want to say that. So they came up with this phrase, and the pursuit of happiness, which really meant because you own your own life, you are at liberty, and because you are at liberty, this means that you can deal with other human beings free in the way that you ply your trade, blacksmith, doctor, whatever, from all kinds of people telling you what to do, where to go, how to eat, when to sleep, blah, 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 blah. Okay? So that's a central notion of government. Why am I talking about this? 6 minutes into the video. It's because of this. For all of the history of this country, there has been, and before this country actually, there's been a tension between what we can sort of reasonably call labor and business, or the working class and the moneyed class. Call it what you will. It doesn't really matter. And in this country, that took on a particular form because of the fact that we acknowledged that every person has a right to their life, their liberty, and the pursuit of their own happiness and the right of their own property. So all of the early arguments about how we should organize things economically mostly came down to leave it alone, let people do what they want, they'll work it out. And even in the cases where they didn't and the government had to get involved, the arguments were honest. It was labor saying, we have a right to our life, we have a right to our liberty, and we have a right to pursue our trade the way we want to. So it ought to be illegal for some businessman out there to, in essence, take away our liberty by saying that, well, if we work for him 4 hours a day, we're not allowed to work for anyone else for another 4 hours a day. Or if we, work here in the spring, we shouldn't be able to go work here in the winter. And people tried to enforce labor contracts like that, and those ended up being illegal. Over here, labor, they're saying, well, wait a minute, if the conditions of your employment are such that I don't get to say what I want and go where I want and do what I want, even when I'm not on the job, when I'm not representing your company, then you're taking away my fundamental liberties. I'm free to be whatever religion I want. I'm free to be, whatever. And it's not your business what I'm doing when I'm not at your business. As long as it doesn't impact upon your business, that's none of your business. Which is kind of a pun almost. So labor was always arguing those kinds of things. And those are honest arguments based on sound moral and ethical principles within the concept that we all have our own lives, our own liberty, and our own pursuit of happiness. Nothing wrong with any of that, okay? Business would come along, or the moneyed class would come along, whatever you want to call them, it doesn't matter to me. And they would say, well, now, wait a minute, what about our life, our liberty, and our pursuit of happiness? We own this land, we own this business, whatever it is. I've worked hard to build my blacksmith shop up to the point where I've got 2 or 3 of them in various counties around the state or whatever. I ought to be able to run my business the way I want. That's my property. You're talking about taking away my life, my liberty, my pursuit of happiness by forcing me to do things in the way that I don't want to do them, in which I might think are not even economically sound or morally sound in some ways. And so there was that tension because 2 very moral positions based on sound moral and ethical and political principles came into play, where people were arguing really about their life, their liberty, and their pursuit of happiness, whether they were a big business owner or whether they were somebody who was a common laborer. And those arguments were honest. So why am I talking about this thing called the Nexus? It's because over time, government has gotten in bed with either labor or business, that we no longer have a state of affairs where what we are trying to do is really protect everyone's life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. We're really not. And here's what's happened. You have a certain politician, political party, group within a political party or an organization, and they say, we're pro-labor, we're for the little guy, we want to protect the rights of the working man. And they use that language in a very propagandistic way because they know that that language sells. But when you really, really look into what it is that they are pro and what it is that they are con, they are not really so much pro-labor and pro the little guy as they are trying to get the government to work things, to give advantages only to large labor unions, and to give power to large labor unions, and to kind of push everybody who isn't a member of a big labor union to the wayside. Okay? That's not based on a sound principle of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, when all you're trying to do is grab power for yourself and take that power away from other people. Now, on the other side, there are people who would call themselves, well, I'm pro-business, I'm pro-whatever, capitalist, I'm pro-free market, and they say, I'm just for protecting the rights of honest businessmen to operate their businesses the way they see fit. And they use that language for propagandistic purposes because it sounds good. You know, you don't want to say what you're really doing, which is when you look into it, you say, that's not what you're really doing. You're not really pro-business. You're only pro-big business. You're trying to work things along with the government so that you can make things good for you and a handful of businesses that are so big that you can deal with all these regulations and laws and the Bureau of this and the agency of that and the regulatory body of that and that committee and that subcommittee and everybody you've got to answer to. You can deal with that because you're this huge company and you've got an army of lawyers on your payroll. But the poor guy out there running the 10-man shop, he hasn't got a chance, and you are using the force of government to take away his life, his liberty, and his pursuit of property and happiness and all that good stuff by using the force of government to push him out of the marketplace and to give yourself an unfair business advantage. This is what's really happening in the world right now. And most of the time, when you see legislation or anything that claims to be pro-labor, it's really pro-big union. And most of the time, when you see something that says that it's pro-business, it's pro-big business. And we're pushing anybody that's not a part of a labor union out of the picture, and we're giving an extreme disadvantage to anybody who's not a big business, and we're pushing all the small and medium-sized guys out. Now, where this really comes together in a nexus is whether they figured it out or it's just the natural course of evolution or de-evolution. Government's gotten involved, and now you have this kind of unholy triad with government at the top, big business over here, and big labor over here, and they are all colluding together. Big business is in bed with big labor, which are both in bed with big government to do one thing and one thing only, and that is to control everything about the economic climate, to tell you, in essence, when you will get up, when you will go to bed, what you will eat, when you will eat it, what you can say and where you can say it, who you can associate with it, what things you can believe in some cases. And not only just in the business area, but in the totality of your life. And that has nothing to do with the pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's just a means of pretending like you're for business, you're for labor, oh, we're the government, we're here to help you, and you end up controlling every aspect of everyone's life. Doubt me? Maybe I'll make a point of proving that in future videos. But this is what I call the nexus. Big business, big labor, big government, all together, taking away your freedom, taking away your right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And on some level, if we are going to continue as a free people in a constitutional republic, we are going to have to begin taking apart this nexus of power that is trying to control all of our lives. That's Zombie Tactics for today, and I hope I didn't freak you out with something a little overboard from what I normally do on this channel. We'll make more videos of this kind, and I'll explain my thinking further as time goes on, as well as all the other stuff we do on this channel. That's Zombie Tactics for today. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.